This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Welcome back to the second part of my discussion with ChangeMaker's Sister Donna Markham, the president and CEO of Catholic Charities. Sister Donna, we wrapped up part one talking about your meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris, who is our first female vice president, and coincidentally, you're the first woman to lead Catholic Charities, which has been around since 1910. How do you feel about being a pioneer, and how does it affect how you lead?
Well, it's hard to know the impact on an organization. And certainly for myself, I don't typically go to gender as the reason I'm in any position. I've been the first woman in a number of roles that I've had in my life, and this is another one. But I think possibly the style of leadership may be a little different because of the experiences I've had. I've been in leadership in a number of healthcare situations as well as religious entities, and I think you learn a lot. And women, I think, have a little edge, and I wouldn't say it's always true, but sometimes we do have a little edge in being able to work at the affective, relational level a little bit more easily. But I'm very hesitant to make generalizations because there are a lot of wonderful men that do that too. But it's been wonderful, and I've not felt in any way that my gender has made that any more difficult than it would be for my counterparts who are male. It's the interesting parts of life. We get led to places we don't think we're going to ever land. And this is one of them.
Well, and that's what's so unique about being a pioneer, whether your path was the first person to be in that space or, all your experience and your degrees and everything has also led you there. But always being that first person in is a unique distinction and, one to be respected because, the people that come after you too, you are making a way for others to value this time here. I think of what Catholic Charities provides, just on the national spectrum here, and to oversee all of that, from your unique perspective and, whatever gender is in that role, there has to be a lot of priority and thought and assessment and deliberation. And so every single person is coming to that with their own, unique life experiences. And so just to have a transition moment for Catholic Charities is a great page in an already large and full book. And speaking of what Catholic Charities is doing, you guys have been very aggressive and compassionate at the same time with how much, need that you're able to address. I believe I read you guys provide about 5.1 billion in services, with so much need. I mean, how or what is it that you guys are able to do that you feel is so much more effective for you?
Well, it's hard to know if you'd say it more effective, but what I can say is that the network of Catholic Charities agencies across the country are staffed by extraordinary people. 167 agencies in every state of the Union and the U.S. territories, and operating over 3,000 service sites. So it's the goodness of the people that are staffing these agencies across the United States that really are to be commended for the success of our work. And each of them is faced with different needs. Like our agencies along the southern border had to pivot very quickly when the floods of migrants came across the border, and we're not in the political part of that, we're in the humanitarian part of that as respite for people. But and they had to rely on volunteers to assist, and very many volunteers to assist and to help the people that had made the long journey from Central America or South America into the United States, and then face all of the challenges of getting their documentation and their legal situations straightened out. So they're doing one thing. Another part of the country, there may be a huge need for people in jobs training and employment opportunities, especially in our rural areas. So some of those agencies work in that way. So these are a lot of these are private public partnerships. We do work with the government in many of these areas, and we also raise a considerable amount of money from donors and both individuals and corporations, foundations who help us. So that's the value of having a very long history, and I like to think a pretty credible history of service in the United States. That we have great partners, we have a great staff, and they're all responding to the needs in their particular geographic area. Because as we know, the country's big and the needs are very disparate.
Speaking of one of those other private partnerships that you mentioned, I heard that recently you guys launched a major digital transformation initiative.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Well, we're working with some corporations that are helping us, but one of the things we've learned, and this is an example of it, but let's just take for an example, the migrant situation would be the most simply understood, I think, for the listeners. But a migrant crosses the border, is taken by ICE or Border Patrol to one of our agencies for respite help. That often means that they need to get to another part of the country to be with their family. So Catholic Charities works to get them to that part of the country, but then they're working at the border, but where they may land might be somewhere in the middle of the interior of the United States. So the digital transformation this is one example where it will allow Catholic Charities, say in Detroit, to be able to be in contact with Catholic Charities at the border and know about that person, not have them have to go through all of the intake procedures again, but they'll be connected to them right away and will know what they need and how to get them the assistance they need. Another area would be within an agency, a person comes in first maybe because they're hungry, but then we find out they really need a behavioral health care. So they do an intake process with one program, which would be the food security part of Catholic Charities, but they really need help in the behavioral health end. So again, so that person doesn't have to be re-entered into a system in a separate program. All of that is being streamlined so that once we know the person and know the needs that they have, the material, the information can go with them to the program that is best suited to serve them. So it's a wonderful shortening of process, and anything we can do to get rid of red tape, I'm all for it.
Exactly. And it's so fascinating that you're leveraging the technology here with the current needs, and it's translating into faster service or better service for the in person. So
Yeah,
that's what we want technology to do for us.
absolutely.
So what other exciting endeavor, like what other milestone achievement do you want to highlight for our listeners? Because there's so many different areas that you guys are involved in. I'm sure it's
That's a good
hard to
point.
just mention one or two here like we've done so far.
No, there's wonderful initiatives underway, and let me just speak to one. Like, there's one idea that Catholic Charities was known for in the past. We had soup kitchens, and we had places where people could get a meal. Well, one of the initiatives that is getting real traction across the country is for the Catholic Charities agencies to begin to transform those soup kitchens, basically, or into training sites. So people who came there to get food are now being trained in how to prepare a meal, how to serve meals, how to set up what was formerly a soup kitchen into a form of a little restaurant. But it's training people to serve, to help, and it's restoring dignity both in the people that are learning the trade, but also the people that are being served. So Those sorts of creative initiatives really, I think, are exciting, and they're myriad of them. But that's one that I just love seeing that, and I've visited a few of those. Taking food pantries and turning them into something that would look much more like a grocery store. And so people are learning how to do that, how to staff it, how to run it. So it's very different mentality than what we might have called in the past a hand out. This is a hand up. The workforce training, social enterprise development area is a burgeoning one. Of course, we had to modify some of our attempts in light of COVID, but I think things are beginning to ramp up now. So I'm very happy about that.
And workforce training is just one of the many areas when you talk about, dignity and allowing individuals to have, access for themselves. It's not just the housing, but, workforce training. They want to have, pride of a job, pride of workmanship. And so often we're just focused on the supportive services that, we really have to remember, this desire also for many participants to be involved and even have some type of training offered to them and not just rely on them to kind of go down to the workforce center. They want something a little more, unique for them and where they are in their life. So that's an excellent program that you guys are offering.
Yeah, it's really these are exciting things. I think it's always about not just trying to patch up something, but how do we fix it so it's really yielding wonderful results, both at the level of personal self-confidence and self-respect, but also at making a difference in how we deal with poverty in this country. So another one, Katie, is what's happening with the whole disaster preparedness field. We're doing, we're besieged by natural disasters. We have the humanitarian disasters. The situation at the border, I would say, is a humanitarian disaster. And then we're faced with the pandemic, which in its own way presented its own disaster qualities. So what we've tried to do now is, instead of just having like a strike team to deal with the disasters, we've pivoted into disaster preparedness training. So our staff is actually training people in various areas across the United States to know how to handle a disaster, whether it's a natural disaster like a hurricane or a flood or fire, or a humanitarian disaster of one sort or another, and how they can what are the mechanics of leveraging the community to really respond effectively, so that the community itself has the resources and doesn't have to depend on somebody from the outside coming in to the same extent that they might have in the past. So that's another example, I think, of really trying to take a look at um, how we move to spread an idea, to mitigate a social problem by involving others, training others to join us in those efforts. That's what I'm very proud of these days too.
You've been named one of the top 50 nonprofit leaders in the United States. And, while I'm sure that's an excellent management accolade, but I'm sure that you apply that in so many areas of your style or personal passion. But what does something like that mean in the day to day for you?
Well, first of all, I'd have to preface this by saying I am extraordinarily humbled. I have no idea how this happens, or I mean, you don't apply for it or anything else; it just happens. And I've just been very humbled by that kind of honor. And I've met many wonderful leaders, and I know others who are also in that top 50 nonprofit leader group. And my sense is that each one of us feels very humbled by being recognized in that group. And, for everyone in their own arena, we all strive to do the best we can. And I believe that that people really do try to do their best wherever they're working, whether it's in journalism or whether it's in business or healthcare or social services, wherever it is, we all try to do our best. And I don't think most of us expect to be cited or focused on as being excellent. I'm doing the best I can, and it is very humbling.
So, is my last question here.
Sure.
What words of advice do you give the troops, those of us in affordable housing, social services, nonprofits, just each of us who are doing, our own piece of the work here? What words of advice would you give?
I would say that the most important thing is to always keep in mind that what we're doing is really not at all about us personally. It's about those whom we serve. And there, but for the grace of God, any one of us could be on the other side of this equation. So to always remember that it's hard for people to ask for help. It's hard for people to find themselves in need. And the last thing we should ever do is focus any of this on ourselves, but to really focus on the difficulty it is for people who have hit a rough spot and need some assistance. And keep our eyes focused on them and have some sense of empathy for how hard it is for them to come to our doors.
Well, very wise and kind words for all of us, and may we live by them. Thank you so much for your time, Sister Donna, and we wish you and Catholic Charities Godspeed and all well wishes moving forward.
Thanks a million, Katie.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.